Welcome back, everyone. Today's explainer is all about the science of environment, specifically how to make discipline totally effortless. Okay, let's dive into this. Look, if you feel like you're just constantly fighting a losing battle against laziness, well, we're going to completely reframe how you get things done today. And the crazy part? We're going to do it literally just by changing the room you're sitting in.
Seriously, ask yourself for a second. Why on earth do we have like Olympic-level stamina for an hour of doom scrolling on our phones, but 20 minutes of actual focused work feels like medieval torture? We tend to beat ourselves up over this, right? We label it a lack of discipline. We tell ourselves, I just have zero willpower. But actually, scratch that. Science tells us a completely different story. This is absolutely not a moral failing, and it's not some deep flaw in your character. It's simply a matter of how your brain is wired.
Think of it like this. Your brain is essentially locked in this perpetual, totally exhausting tug-of-war between two opposing forces. On one side, you've got what feels really good right now, in this exact second. And on the other, what's actually going to benefit you later on. And, guess which one usually wins? Yeah, the brain naturally gravitates toward immediate comfort. But the really incredible news here is that you can actually train your brain to stop fighting this war and start genuinely enjoying disciplined behavior. And the secret? It doesn't lie in forcing yourself to change your mindset. Nope, it lies in changing what's around you.
So that brings us to our core strategy today, which we're calling the friction-free framework. Listen, we are absolutely not going to rely on motivation today. Motivation is famously notoriously flaky. Instead, we're relying entirely on environmental design. By controlling your surroundings, you remove all the heavy lifting. The whole goal is to set up your room and your workspace so that the good habits actually require significantly less discipline than the bad ones. Basically, we want to reduce the friction to start working and totally maximize the friction to start procrastinating.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the word quietly. Your environment, it isn't shouting at you, it's just subtly nudging you all day long. Think about it for a second. If your phone is sitting right beside you on your desk, your environment is quietly whispering to you. Notifications are just constantly right there. Endless entertainment is literally just one single tap or swipe away. And when temptation is that close and that easy, well, resisting it suddenly requires a massive amount of mental energy. You're draining your willpower battery just by sitting next to your device.
So instead of white-knuckling it and depending entirely on your willpower, we change the environment. We engineer a space of high friction for bad habits and low friction for the good ones. Put the phone in another room, or, even chuck it in a drawer in another room. Use software to block distracting websites on your computer. Keep everything you actually need for your work directly within arm's reach. It's just simple math, guys. The easier the good behavior is to execute and the harder the distraction is to access, the less actual discipline you need to summon. You are literally making it harder to fail than it is to succeed.
Okay, so once you've optimized your physical environment, the next massive hurdle is just starting the task itself. Your brain is hardwired to resist tasks that feel too large, too heavy, or just too difficult. So if you sit down at your beautifully optimized desk and tell yourself, all right, I need to study for 3 straight hours, your brain immediately throws up this massive brick wall of resistance. That sounds terrible to a brain that's just looking for comfort. So we bypass that wall entirely. How? By making the first step ridiculously, almost laughably small. To get around that resistance, you just shrink the commitment. These actions are designed to be almost impossible to refuse. Instead of reading a whole massive chapter, commit to reading just one single page. Instead of a grueling hour-long workout, just commit to 5 push-ups. Instead of a marathon work session, tell yourself, hey, I only have to work for 10 minutes. By shrinking the commitment, you drastically lower the psychological barrier to entry. Your brain looks at read one page and thinks, okay, yeah, I can handle that, no big deal. And this is the magic of the ridiculously small step. It's all about momentum. It's a fundamental psychological reality that once you actually begin a task, continuing that task becomes remarkably easier. Getting the ball rolling is honestly 90% of the battle. By lowering that initial tiny bit of friction basically down to 0, you trick your brain into starting. And you've probably felt this, right? Once you've read that one page, you're already in the flow state. The book is open, and reading page 2 feels completely natural. The initial friction is conquered.
Right, so let's see how this builds into our next crucial phase. We've optimized the room, and we've successfully tricked the brain into starting. But how do we sustain this? How do we lock in these environmental and behavioral changes so we don't just, fall off the wagon tomorrow? Well, the answer is by building an effort-reward loop and locking it into a solid routine. We need to stop relying on fleeting emotions and really start hacking the brain's deeply ingrained reward center.
To build this, we've got to understand the feedback loop. Discipline becomes incredibly easy when your brain associates the effort of a task with an immediate sense of reward. See, most people think they have to wait months until they get that promotion or lose 20 pounds or get an A on the final exam to feel successful. But here's the thing. If you wait that long, your brain gets completely starved for dopamine. You need to create an immediate feedback loop so that your brain actually starts expecting satisfaction not from avoiding the work, but from actually completing it.
And creating that immediate reward is actually incredibly simple. Track your progress visually. Literally check off completed tasks on a physical piece of paper. The physical act of checking a box actually releases a tiny little hit of dopamine. Or give yourself a short, predetermined break immediately after finishing a small chunk of work. So the crucial point is this. When you link the effort to an immediate reward, you establish a routine. And when something becomes part of a routine, you no longer have to spend your precious mental energy deciding whether or not to do it. You've already decided when and where you're going to act beforehand.
Which brings us to a pretty stark comparison. Motivation? It's a total roller coaster. You are entirely at the mercy of your mood, and feelings change constantly. You are simply not going to feel motivated every single morning. It's literally impossible. If you rely on motivation, you are leaving your success completely up to chance. But highly disciplined people, they don't rely on emotions. They rely on the ironclad gears of a routine. When your environment is set up and your routine kicks in, that awful decision fatigue just vanishes. You just execute.
And this brilliantly illustrates our final and honestly most powerful long game strategy in our explainer today. We've changed the room, we've lowered the friction, and we've built the routine. Now we change the identity. Because one of the absolute strongest ways to build lasting discipline is to fundamentally shift how you view yourself right at your core.
Pay really close attention to the phrasing here. Most of us walk around saying things like, ugh, I need to become disciplined. But that phrasing implies that discipline is this external chore, something you are currently failing at and forcing upon yourself. Instead, you must start thinking, I'm someone who keeps promises to myself. Just let that sink in. That is a completely different worldview. Discipline becomes so much easier when the behavior feels like a natural expression of who you already are, rather than this huge, heavy burden you're forcing yourself to carry around.
Now, of course, you can't just say the words. You have to actually prove that new identity to yourself, and you do that through those ridiculously small actions we talked about earlier, executed every single day. And listen closely here. You do not need to be perfect. Perfection is a total myth. You just need to provide your brain with enough repeated evidence, enough checked boxes, enough 5-minute work sessions that it actually begins to believe in this new version of you. You don't need more motivation. You just need to train your brain to make this disciplined behavior feel completely normal. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Take a literal look around the room you're sitting in right now. Like, actually look at your desk, your phone, your space. What is your environment quietly tricking your brain into craving? Is it setting you up for effortless focus, or is it dragging you toward distraction? Remember, once you understand how your brain works, changing your habits becomes a completely different game. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and go optimize your space.